I think it is clear to believe in the power of ideas.
Fresh thinking of the Manhattan Institute.
I'm Larry Mone, president of the Manhattan Institute. It's my honor to introduce Tom Donohue, president of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. It was in 1997 that Tom Donohue became president and CEO of the U.S. Chamber, and over the past 15 years, he has built the Chamber into an unparalleled lobbying and political powerhouse. He has more than quadrupled the Chamber's budget and added hundreds of thousands of new members. During Donohue's tenure, the Chamber's lobbyists, policy experts, legal advocates, and communicators have helped secure business victories on Capitol Hill, in the regulatory agencies, in politics, in courts of law, and in the court of public opinion and before governments around the world. One of Tom's great abilities is the knack to identify key issues well ahead of the curve. In an era of economic and fiscal challenges, Donohue has aggressively advanced the American Jobs and Growth Agenda, a plan that includes expanding trade and domestic energy production, rebuilding America's infrastructure, combating an avalanche of new regulations, protecting intellectual property, revitalizing capital markets, and reforming entitlements and the tax system. Under his leadership, the Chamber has emerged as a major political force in races for the Senate and the House of Representatives. As part of this bipartisan effort, millions of grassroots business advocates, as well as the Chamber's Federation of State and Local Chambers, and industry associations mobilized in support of pro-business candidates. The Manhattan Institute itself has worked closely with the Chamber on a number of issues over the years and continues to do so. Our Center for Legal Policy enjoys a particularly strong working relationship with the Chamber's Institute for Legal Reform, which Tom established early on in his tenure and that Lisa Ricard runs so well. We're glad that Lisa was able to join us here today. What I admire most about Tom is how he combines a deep understanding of the issues with his ferocity and courage as an advocate. While so many in Washington fold under the pressure, Tom Donohue refuses to stand down for that which he believes in. A classic journalistic interview question to ask your subject is, if you were stuck in a foxhole in a bad situation, who would you want sitting beside you? Tom Donohue would be number one answer on many people's lists in Washington. Please join me in welcoming Tom Donohue.
Thank you very much, Larry. Thank you for not reading the obituary, and thank you for your very thoughtful hyperbole. Allow me just to make one adjustment in what Larry said, where it says Tom Donohue, just say, and 450 of the smartest, most courageous, and most really serious, super people that have ever been in this business, and we've done it together. So I'm going to talk for a little while, and then we'll do some Q&A, and I'll leave a good amount of time for that, so start thinking about what you'd like to ask. I operate under a pretty simple system. I either know the answer or I'll make it up. And, and most of the time, I'm close to right, so we'll give it a go. Larry, again, thank you for inviting me. Thank you for including, and thank you very much for the very valuable collaborative relationship we have with your organization, putting facts and studies and information together with advocacy, and we really appreciate that. No one single person has done more to make this institution the valuable place that it is than you have, and it's very different and very much the same. And when you put them together, it's really a strong team. You know, the fact-based analysis and market-oriented solutions offered by the Institute are needed today more than ever. This is especially true as our policymakers in official Washington neglect some of the fundamental realities. You've probably heard the old quip, that a gaffe in Washington is when someone accidentally tells the truth. Well, there's a pronounced shortage of truth-telling in Washington these days. It's one thing to differ over philosophical direction and approach. That's democracy. But the routine neglect of basic facts and the fundamental realities is something we are seeing more and more at every level of government, in our politics and in our governance, and it should concern all of us. That's why the Manhattan Institute and other organizations like yours are so important. You have a philosophical rudder, everybody grants you that. But your research and your conclusions are grounded in the facts. They stand up to the test of reason and sound argument. Keep doing what you're doing and do it more, please. Now, policymakers in Washington could sure use a strong dose of reality right now, and let me give you just a few examples. The first reality is that we can't do much of anything without economic growth, and you can't create growth and jobs without the private sector. Here's another reality. Demography is destiny. Demographics is destiny. That's the one you've heard before. Well, there are plenty of folks in Washington who are acting like they have never heard this before, stubbornly refusing to acknowledge any changes in entitlements to reflect longer life expectancy, earlier retirement, more retirees, and a stronger shortage of native-born Americans to run our economy. Those are facts. There's another reality most people know is true, but they want to wish away, and that is that there is no such thing as a national economy anymore. That is the truth, at least not like we once knew it. We are all part of a global economy, and a very competitive one at that. Our policies must reflect this reality. And any rational analysis of the facts and our history will tell us that of all the things we believe make America special, the one that really stands out above all others and explains our success and our leadership is the value of economic freedom, the right to give it a go. Economic freedom, the right to take a risk and to be rewarded for one's success, the right to take a risk and to fail, and then to get up off the floor and do it again. The dream of standing on your own 2 feet, seizing an opportunity, and building a self-sufficient system through hard work and personal responsibility. It's all part of the American secret sauce and something we must preserve for future generations. So why would we ever want to move by design or by accident to a system where we turn over more and more of our freedom and our responsibility to the central government? We can find a way to help the truly disadvantaged without squandering America's greatest gift and our greatest strength, our personal liberty and our self-reliance. So at the Chamber, our agenda is fashioned around these realities. We call it the American Jobs and Growth Agenda. But it's more than that. It's an agenda that focuses on our national and our nation's global competitiveness and our need to be fiscally responsible. It's an agenda that understands just how vital our economic and other freedoms are to our success, to our prosperity, and to our freedom. So permit me to tell you a little more about that from my perspective. Let's talk first about growth. Growth won't solve all of our problems, but we can't solve any of them without economic growth. Too many policymakers in Washington fail to understand the power of growth or where it comes from. Economic growth is the force that provides opportunity for the young, security for the old, and allows diverse families and communities to pursue their idea of the American dream. and what a powerful force it can be. For example, if the economy grew at 4%, that's a pretty high number, but if it did, instead of a meager 2% that we have now, hopefully in the second half, we could create 10 million additional jobs over the next decade. Of course, Larry, as we were talking, we could create 10 million additional jobs by fracking oil and gas. We could return in a decade, we could return the economy to full employment through growth alone with no rise in government spending. With a 4% growth, the government would collect more than $3 trillion in additional revenues over the coming decade, and we'd see a 30% reduction in the 10-year budget deficit. That means, by the way, you want some quick arithmetic, something like $7 trillion would still be added to the deficit. So here's another reality. Household income would increase significantly. 3 million people would rise out of poverty, and charitable giving would increase by about $200 billion. Pretty good. And here's another reality. Without growth, you can't get those jobs. So why isn't growth the #1 story in Washington? The president has made jobs and growth an intermittent priority from time to time, when it should really be the major priority. Many members of Congress truly believe jobs and growth are the byproduct of government spending. If that were true, we'd be living in paradise. Growth comes from a robust private sector that is allowed to take legitimate risks, that has the freedom to innovate, and that gets rewarded, not punished, for their success. At the Chamber, our overriding priority for 2013 remains stronger private sector growth that will put Americans back to work, raise their standard of living, and position us to compete and win around the world. The big question is, how do we get there? First, we've got to attract global talent. We won't have sustained growth and jobs without attracting the best and the brightest and figuring out a way to get them here and keep them here. This is the one area where Washington appears to be finally accepting the reality that A, we can't deport 11 million undocumented workers because our economy would collapse without them, and that it would tear apart families in a way that's unacceptable to our belief system. And second, doing so would betray our history as a nation of immigrants. The fact is that our immigration system is broken. It's not serving the interests of our economy, our businesses, or our society. We can sustain important programs. We can't sustain important programs for the elderly and the needy without a stronger economy and a broader tax base. The Chamber has been advocating for immigration reform for years, and this year might be our best chance to make it work. We believe immigration reform must have at least 4 interrelated components. It must square and secure our borders. We've made progress. We have more to do. It must include thoughtfully designed employment-based visa programs that would allow businesses to use immigrant labor on the top high-skilled area, particularly when we educate them, and on the lower area where we need people to come to work. Remember, 10,000 people in America retire every day, 7 days a week. And we're an aging population, and we have got to be able to attract people at both ends of this scale. Immigration reform must include a workable, reliable national employee verification system, not a system that's out to punish people, but a system that both the government and the individual companies will use in a comparative and a cooperative way. And finally, it must provide a path out of the shadows for the 11 million undocumented workers who are living in the United States. Now, to succeed in a competitive global economy, we've got to remain an open and welcoming society. By the way, we follow at the Chamber something like 350 issues. We have all kinds of committees that decide on our policies, but it's good sometimes to be boss. My mother-in-law came to the United States at 11 years of age to join her mother who had another family, and my father-in-law came at about the same, a little bit older, to join an entrepreneur. And these are the people that had the risk to come here. And she was one of the 5 smartest people I've ever known, with 4 years of education and taking every TV education program that anyone ever offered. This country has attracted people like that forever, and if you turn them away, you'll wish you didn't. I would say one thing else about, you can look in the newspaper today and tomorrow and probably Sunday, and you'll find out that the Chamber and the AFL-CIO and a couple of other unions have come to an agreement on most of this, much to everybody's surprise. Doesn't surprise me. Look at the union numbers are going way down. They have an idea that if they had people that worked here, that they might have a chance to make their business go. So much. I'm looking for the workers, for the companies, that if they don't get them, here's what happens. If you don't get workers in the high end and you don't get workers in the worker end, then what you do, if you're a U.S. company, you send your work to where the workers are. This is not complicated. Okay, so second, we've got to responsibly develop our extraordinary natural resources. We have more, this is new to us, by the way, in 10 years, we have more oil, gas, and coal and nuclear energy than any other country, and we are now the largest single natural gas producer in the world. By swiftly and safely developing more American energy, we can drive stronger growth and generate government revenues that we can then use to tackle our fiscal problems. We can boost manufacturing and exports and sustain a stable supply of domestic energy that will reduce our reliance on foreign sources. To give you an example, all over Europe, people are saying, I'm paying $8 a gallon for gas. I converted it from the euros, paying $8 a gallon for gas and a comparable amount to generate power for my factories. We should go to the United States. All over the world, chemistry and chemical companies that left the United States to get their seed corn, which is natural gas, are coming back here for 2 reasons. They can get it at a real cheap price here, and by the way, they're getting out of the Middle East. So what a great opportunity for us. We can, boost manufacturing, have a stable supply of domestic energy, and reduce our reliance on foreign sources, some of which are a little shaky. And we can put a hell of a lot of people to work over the next 20 years. Just in the last 2, we put 1,750,000 people to work fracking gas and oil. By the way, don't get too excited about fracking. We've been doing it for 69 years. And we're doing it better today than we were doing it then. In a speech 2 weeks ago, the president hailed the benefits of American energy, including gas and oil. But what he didn't say is that these sectors have thrived in spite of the federal government, not because it. Or what he did say is if we made a lot of money on that, we could put it into green energy. The surge in unconventional oil and gas, for example, is made possible by private sector innovation and industry-driven technological achievements. Development of shale resources has largely taken place on private lands and paid to states over the last year or so $63 billion in cold cash, and those states needed the cash. If the government wants to help and not hurt, it can start by opening up new lands to safe, responsible exploration. The government of the United States owns about 60% of our land mass. No problem, but let's open it up. The government should create a predictable and a fair regulatory environment and stop subjecting energy projects to duplicate reviews, hard to get permits, and on and on and on lawsuits, all about trying to pander to one political interest group. Federal roadblocks have stymied the vital project of the Keystone XL pipeline. And now everywhere I go, are we going to get the pipeline? Yeah, we're going to get the pipeline. And if somebody asked me about that a little later, I'll tell you about it. The federal government shouldn't pick the winners and losers. When it does, it gets Cylinder or other companies. So when we let the market forces work, we get a shale boom and new technology. We can take full advantage of our great energy opportunity from all sources, from all methods of getting it if the private and public sectors work together. So third, it is high time for greater global engagement. What does that mean? 95% of the people we want to sell something to don't live in this country. They live somewhere else around the world. It's pretty simple. In his State of the Union speech, President Obama called for swift completion of the Trans-Pacific Pipeline Partnership, not pipeline, partnership, and he announced, I got pipelines on the brain, son, and he announced that the United States was ready to begin negotiations with Europe on a U.S.-EU trade and investment partnership, an idea the Chamber introduced 2.5 years ago. We couldn't agree more. Let's hurry up and put American business to work and get these deals done. And by the way, TPP isn't just about Asia. It encompasses all of the coast of the United States and South America and Canada, and, it's fascinating. And we need to get this going. We also need to move that European deal. The U.S. and the EU high-level working group is just about to put out their report, and I think it probably will sustain the best things we could think about it. But let me give you this in a minute. Europe is in a slow decline economy. And Europe is, as an area, our largest export partner. Europe is China's largest export partner. China is our fastest growing export partner. And if Europe goes in the can, that whole triangle goes in the can. That's a bad idea. An ambitious and comprehensive transatlantic agreement would be huge on both sides of the pond, driving jobs and growing at a time when our national economies badly need it. There are, as you can see, a lot of free trade agreements that have been talked about for a long time, but these would put cash on the table right now. It's also important that we welcome global investment. We want people to bring their cash here, 2 ways. Come here, invest, come here and visit. The tourism thing is the great way. When they come in here and leave their money, that's like us trading overseas. The only thing is they just leave it here and don't take it home. So we like that. Next, by the way, we've got, most people don't understand how many jobs that creates. Millions and millions and millions of jobs. Now, next, we've got to remove regulatory barriers and stem the tide of the huge regulatory tsunami that the current administration has started and is planning for the next 4 years. After all, the idea they have is if we can't get it through the Congress, then we'll just do it on the regulatory thing. Now, you remember we all went to school, and we studied there were 3 parts of government. There was the administrative part, and there was the legislative part, and there was the judicial part. I'm racking my brain. I wasn't a great student, but hell, I don't remember anybody telling me about the regulatory part, and today it's the biggest piece of government that we've got, and we better do something. Our economy has thrived when the hand of government has been relatively light, giving entrepreneurs the freedom to innovate and businesses the confidence to invest. The flood of new regulations coming down the pipeline is staggering. The new rules and mandates in the health care law could drive costs through the roof, and they could suppress hiring and investment. But then again, the health care law wasn't going to cost us anymore, was it? I remember. And then the Dodd-Frank financial reform law mandates 447 new regulations, and regulators have only finalized about 1/3 of them. On the environmental front, major EPA rules imposed over the last decade imposed billions and billions of dollars in cost, and the new ozone regulation that we're just getting through will cost $90 billion. Now, we've beaten a lot of that stuff in the Supreme Court, but we're going to run out of courts at the rate they're going. So all told, the federal government issues about 4,000 regulations every year. Is all of that really necessary, you think? We need some of it. There's no question about that. We need to restore common sense and balance our system. We need to streamline the permitting process. We need to bring more accountability to our system and restore congressional oversight over these regulatory agencies. And we need to make sure that the costs don't outweigh the benefits and that the rules are based on sound science, good data, demonstrated need, and the facts. And when the government oversteps its bounds and tramples the rights of businesses or individuals, we'll use the justice system. See, we have one group that Lisa runs to stop all these ridiculous lawsuits around the country in class action and mass action and all that stuff. Then we got another group that sues the government about 150 times a year. But we believe in balance. Their suits are ridiculous and ours are necessary. And finally, let's talk about fiscal responsibility. On this topic, the realities are most obvious and the inaction is the most inexcusable. The realities are this: government spending levels are unsustainable. You cannot keep it up the way we're doing it. Discretionary, defense, and especially entitlement spending have to be bent down a little. We don't have to get rid of the Defense Department. We don't have to get rid of Medicare, but we have got to find ways on the perimeter of fixing these issues. We need more revenue, but raising taxes can't come close to filling that gap. You know all these taxes we raised near the end of the year? Wonderful. We were a lot of people in this room paying more taxes. I think it was just about all of it on the storm. I mean, just think about this. So you can't do it the way they're trying to do it. The richest fifth of Americans already pay about 70% of the taxes. The richest 10% pay 55%. If you got down to the richest 1%. But then again, Madame Lafarge got rid of all those people, and the French have never recovered. So you could, did I say that with C-SPAN on? What the heck. The fact is, you could confiscate 100% of the earnings of couples making more than $1 million a year and still not come anywhere close to solving the deficit problem. So listen, those that claim that higher taxes can eliminate the deficit or that entitlement programs do not add to our debt either don't understand the arithmetic, are disingenuous, or living in a fantasy land. The day we started Medicare, we were borrowing $3 out of every $4 to pay it off, and it's getting bigger and bigger all the time. And most importantly, our growing debt burden will crush the next generation of Americans if we don't do something about it. On this issue, the first deficit we have to address, in my judgment, is the leadership deficit. We need to close the gap. We need to close the gap between rhetoric and reality. Put simply, we've promised far more than we can ever deliver in the way we expect to deliver it. And because of choices many of our leaders of both parties have made, as well as our changing demographics, our fiscal situation is unstable and unpredictable. The bottom line is this: we can't solve the crisis without serious spending restraint, and that requires us to address entitlements first, second, and third. To keep those vital, and they are vital programs, solvent for future generations must be revised to meet the needs of today's population and to match the reality of our changing demographics. We're not talking about cuts in absolute terms. It's going to continue to grow, but we must slow the rate of increase by phasing in reasonable adjustments over a number of years. We also need, but in my opinion will not get in near future, comprehensive tax reform. Our current tax system is antiquated, complicated, and uncompetitive. It's holding us back. But we made so many commitments in the last set of legislation before the end of the year in freezing in all of those components of taxes. I don't think you can get a comprehensive deal, and a lot of people will criticize me for that, but let's talk about the facts. We need, when we get it, the right kind of tax reform, the kind that accelerates growth and job creation and generates more revenues for the government through growth. And we must lower both the corporate and individual rates and get a territorial tax system for our companies if we want to prosper. So let me conclude. Now is the most thrilling time that you're ever going to live in. And this is the most interesting agenda you've ever faced. Does it lend itself to sensational, entertaining, and media-driven coverage? Nah, boring. It's expensive. It's frightening. Of course not. But it's real, and it's based on facts. It faces up to the challenges we face. We need a greater recognition and a respect for the facts in this country. We can have our different philosophies and our different approaches to solving problems, but we won't get very far if we can't get close to agreeing on the facts. You remember the great guy from New York, Patrick Moynihan? He once said, everybody's entitled to his own opinion, but not to his own facts. We must deal with reality, or reality will surely deal with us. It will win out every time. The best way to do so, in my opinion, is to embrace our founding principles. Abraham Lincoln once wrote, those principles are applicable to all men at all times and serve as a rebuke and a stumbling block to the very hamburgers of reappearing tyranny and oppression. I thought I'd do that because Lincoln's pretty big right now in the movies. To preserve liberty and our economic freedoms, we've got to defend our principles, not change them. We must defend against an ever-growing and all-powerful federal government that promotes dependency, erodes personal responsibility, and rules the people instead of the people ruling the government. We must defend against the yoke of a government regulation system that strangles entrepreneurship, innovation, and initiative, the engines of growth and the fundamental building blocks of earned success. We must defend against the idea that America should retreat within its own borders and forfeit our leadership role in the world, because there can be no liberty or prosperity without peace and security. But more than that, we need to go on the offensive. We need to be the vocal and aggressive advocates for a free enterprise system, for global American leadership, for the timeless principles of our founding fathers, and for market-based solutions rooted in the reality that it'll help reignite the economy that put us where we were and put us back on the path to prosperity. The stark reality of the leadership deficit in Washington is that one really cannot afford to ignore. In fact, this is a call to leadership, a leadership unafraid to point out the realities and offer sensible, workable solutions that make solutions, but may involve short-term pain for long-term gain. We need a national conversation over the tough choices that should be made without demeaning the people that have a view that might be different than ours. Doing so requires us to tell people things they don't want to hear. Many of our leaders in Washington won't do so, so we must. This is our call to leadership, and one the Chamber willingly answers with our own agenda for growth, reform, and freedom, and talks about all over the world. So let me conclude where I began, by underscoring the need for common sense dialogue in this country, drawing from the same view of reality and the same set of facts, and then we can fight like hell about our positions. Arguments are one thing. Even gridlock can be okay on occasion, because it can keep bad stuff from happening. But we must be bound together by reason and facts and begin again our leadership in this important regard. We must do this. We must do this because America needs it. Our country needs it, and we'll pay a horrific price if we don't. So I thank you for inviting me and for your kind attention and for all that you do in this organization to press people to see reality, to see the facts and the real solutions and the real challenges. So now I look forward to hearing your thoughts and what you have to say. And remember, I either know the answer or I'll try hard to make it up.
Tom will field his own questions, but just a reminder, C-SPAN is here, so once he picks you, please wait for the microphones to reach you so that our TV audience can hear your question as well. Thank you.
Okay, I'll start right there. And here comes the mic, and it's on your left. Now, we're going to play a little game here. You have to tell me just what your name is and sort of who you are so that I can know what you really mean.
I hope you will take it that I really mean what I say.
Good.
Gerald Walpin, starting with your reference to the Lincoln movie, I want to say that all of us here are probably unanimous that you deserve the Academy Award of setting out the facts and an appropriate objective. But I want to bring it down to a little more practical level that troubles me. We had an election not long ago in which the public heard, maybe not said as well as you did it, the differences between the two candidates. The one that voiced mostly your views lost. I don't want to repeat Romney's mistake of talking about the 47%, but we do know that there are a large number of people who live off of the government and its various revenues that it provides. How, as a practical matter, in this reality, are we going to convince the American public that they should vote against, to some extent, the hand that feeds them and bite the hand that feeds them, and vote for the stronger America and the future that you speak of?
Well, you gave me the quick invitation to make the second real quick speech, but here, look. We don't do presidential politics where we follow it very closely because we do the House and the Senate and it's all interrelated. I would say, parenthetically, that was the toughest, best run, the most unbelievable technological campaign that has ever been run. I was down in Florida over the weekend and I read the 96-page deck just on the technology that was used here and getting the vote out and raising the money and all that. Second, I would call to mind that after the election, they went out and did a whole series of surveys around the country of those that voted. And they asked 4 or 5 questions. No matter how you voted, which of the candidates was better suited to deal with our economic problems? Romney by about 80-some%. Which of the candidates would be better to deal with our global challenges? Romney by 79% or something. Which of the candidates was better to be able to deal with the trade and investment, or whatever the third question was? Romney by a huge number. Then which candidate understood me and my problems and will help me more than the others? Obama with 89% or something. So we know where we have to go. We know that the fundamental issues that people understand that we know we have to fix, people think those guys can fix them, but these guys will help me. The second set of things I would say, because I spent a lot of time, we did very well in our elections in the House, what the chamber did, and in the state Supreme Court and the state Attorney General and all that, which Lisa does, and we got clobbered in the House, in the Senate. Now, there's 2 sets of issues there. We got some of the wrong candidates, some that were even financed to get in the deal by the Democrats. It's a great story, you know. But fundamentally what Republicans did wrong, and by the way, the chamber is not all about Republicans. We'd like to support more Democrats, but the middle has gone away. They'll come back. But the real big-time issue is we didn't tell the story. I talked to a lot of super marketing people, never mind the political guys. They're great, but I went out and talked to the really good people who know how to sell ideas. And they all said, tell me what Romney said about why I want to be president and what I'm going to do to help you. And tell me, no, you've got to think about it, because he was on the defensive from the get-go. He was in a dozen or whatever it is of these Mickey Mouse debates on the social issues and all. It's a serious issue. He didn't get to say, look, people, this is what I'm going to do. And I'll tell you, we're going to do a lot better in our deal on polling, on technology, on giving the message, and on getting in the first place to try and make sure we got people that can at least get a shot at winning. And if you want to talk some more about it, talk to me later. Next. How about way back there somewhere? All right, good.
Gene Epstein, economics columnist from Barron's Financial Weekly. Thank you for an inspiring talk. You alluded at times to the evils of the crony capitalist system, sometimes called corporate welfare, other times just called corporatism, called by Obama and others the partnership between business and government. I would call it the crapitalist system, in which the profit and loss system of capitalism is perverted so that profits are privatized but losses are socialized. That causes problems. It's ubiquitous in agribusiness, in banking, in manufacturing. What is the position of the Chamber of Commerce on the capitalist system and its evils?
Well, first of all, thank you for the question, but I'm serious now a minute. I'd be very interested to talk to you. I deal with the press all the time, and your first 6 paragraphs suggesting maybe we'd have to see what I think about that, but I don't think I said that. So I would be careful. I got it right here. I don't think I said exactly that, and I would be careful how you write that, but now I'll answer your question. There's no question that there is a long-established relationship between companies and the government, and at both ends of the spectrum. First of all the people in the defense business and the heavy research business and in the medical business, they're all entwined in the government because the government is one of the major customers, and we would accept that. The second, there's no question that lots of companies would like to have government largesse. We all like the research tax credit. That's a good thing. We all like other advantages that we can come on through the government arrangement. And by the way, we all don't like the other part, the part that, that regulates us on issues and that directs us on issues that make our business more difficult. So you're exactly right in the concept that there is a more extensive relationship between government and business than maybe there was years ago. And by the way, it's absolutely true by small companies. First of all, you got to get from big to small and understand that a big company spends about 25 or 30% of its resources on buying services from small companies. So there is there a relationship. And small companies like the deals they get. They like that a lot of regulations only apply to companies larger. They like that certain taxes only apply to companies larger, et cetera, et cetera. So it'd be less than factual to say that companies don't have a relationship with the government. My suggestion today, it's getting more significant. It is getting more difficult for big companies to plan and figure out where they're going as the massive amount of regulations in healthcare, Dodd-Frank, environment, labor and employment law It's getting much, much more complicated. And yes, the relationships, therefore, between business and government are much more complicated than they were. And there'll probably be a line of people from business here that will meet me at the door, but that's fine. And facts are facts, remember? Thank you very much. We'll go over here.
Tom, thank you for your speech and for being here in New York with us. Those of us who live in New York and have been here for a long time, and those of us affiliated with the Manhattan Institute, are often very preoccupied with an issue that you didn't mention, and that's public employee unions. And I understand that the U.S. Chamber is involved in working in that area as well, and I don't think you had a chance to mention it yet.
Well, of course, you look at my background, I have an interesting relationship with public employee unions. I helped negotiate the contract years ago between the United States government and the then 800,000 or 850,000 postal workers, who, by the way, at the time were at the top of their game. And the Postal Service was perking along and coming out of the government and providing different services. And today, they've been shrunk by, I don't know, 400,000 already because of the issues of new technology, because of the issues of new ways of communicating, because of the issues of new ways of paying bills and spending money and doing all this sort of stuff. And the reason I point that out, A, I have a lot of experience in it, and B, see what happens. And here's what happens. They still have all of those pension liabilities, all of them. And if you have half the number of people paying in that you had paying in before, this is almost a mountain too high to climb. So there was a great study done last year, and it was done by the old geezers, you know, George Volcker, Joe Califano, Ravitch, all the New Yorker guys, you know, and a lot of other people, George Schultz, all those guys. And so they went out to look at this very issue. They went out to look at what are the burdens on the states. You know, the federal government can print money, and towns and townships, and they can go bankrupt, but states can't go bankrupt. So first of all, they looked, what are the pension liabilities? And by the way, the idea was to look broadly and then pick 6 states, 4 blue states and 2 sort of different states. So what did they find out? When they first tried to count, no, I meant, are they red or are they purple? Or so when they first started counting this up, the states told them they had a liability of about $1.5 trillion. But then when they added it all, this is on pensions, when they added it all up, it was $3.5 trillion. This is unfunded. And then they looked at health care, and they found generally that nobody had accrued any money for health care for public employees, remember? And by the way, we have fewer of them now in recent time than we had. Although you saw what Rahm Emanuel did in Chicago. He got a whole bunch of those people between, you know, that were retiring but weren't, sometime with his help, and not eligible yet for Medicare. So he just told them all, go over and get on Obama's new health care system. Now, you think other mayors are not going to do that. So now then, they continued the study, and they said, and we're now, remember I told you how big the pension liability is. Well, how bad is that? So they gave them 3 things. Medical questions, the issues of pensions, and the issues of Medicare. Which was the worst? And, you know, what's a show of hands? And I'll tell you, the pensions, you know, all this $3.5 trillion, that's nothing compared to the Medicaid cost in the states, which are like a rocket just going up. And who knows how to deal with that. So Ravitch was on the stage, and somebody said, well, what would happen if a state goes broke? Ravitch said New York went broke, and Jerry Ford was the president. So they all ran down to see Jerry and said, we need some money. He said, good luck, go fix it. But remember, this is when New York was the capital of the headquarters of all the companies. Dick Shin went out and got all these guys together, and they changed the law, and they did all this stuff, and Jerry still didn't give him any money. He gave him a line of credit, and he took a lien on all kinds of assets in New York, and they all worked it out. So here's the fundamental question. When Illinois, not California, when Illinois, which is broke, comes in and says to their Illinois president, look, we need some cash, what are we going to do? I know what we're going to do. We're going to call Ravage and see if we can have an example of how this could be done. Public employees are dedicated people. We have lots of them, and some of them give their lives for us. And so we can't have an across-the-board. Public employee unions have sucked the vitality out of a lot of communities and are trying to change the way corporations are run. They're the people that are leading much of the argument to get businesses to have to disclose every nickel they put into politics and every nickel they might spend dealing with governance and policy on the state and federal level, because they want to be the people that get the state legislatures and the federal government to support their issues, and they want to be able to control the companies and keep them out of doing that. So bad news for those guys. Ain't happening. And we're very, very involved in that. By the way, the proxy access lawsuit, we won that. And there's going to be more to come, and this is a real serious issue, but you got to do it in two ways. We value the service of our own public employees. We have got to deal with the economics that we have created, and it is huge. Yep.
David DeRosa, Real Clear Politics. Are we going to get a Keystone Pipeline?
Yes. You see, you didn't ask me when.
When?
Don't know. Now, I think I'd give you one thought. I mean, all the arguments are there. And we are building the pipeline from Oklahoma to the coast. We have gotten a release from the governor of Nebraska that it's okay to move it. You know, he was helping during the election. And, the argument that the Canadians, if we don't do it, they're going to build a pipeline to the West Coast and to sell it all to the Chinese, they're going to build that pipeline anyway. But the real issue, the Canadians are probably our closest friends. I mean, they're unbelievable. We treat them so badly because they're family. I tell them that all the time. But I will tell you that if they stiff the Canadians on this deal, there will be hell to pay, and nobody's going to like it, because the Prime Minister there is an unbelievably able and competent guy, and I think he would take such steps to demonstrate that fair is fair. We've been playing around with this thing for a long time, and if you stiff us on that, you're about to find out what stiffing's all about. I have time for 2 or 3 more. How about way in the back? No, you got your hands up. Stand up. Oh, if you can't, you don't want to stand up, they'll bring you the mic. Stay right there. Go ahead.
My name's Alice Labrie, and I'm former U.S. Department of State Foreign Service, where I learned my first 2 weeks in Turkey. It's all commerce all the time, which it should be. And I'm also a registered Republican in Harlem. Got scars to prove it.
Good for you.
Thank you, Melanie, for being your guest, and Scott. Sir, I need your comment, since I live in Target City. Well, I really look to my government to protect me, in times of natural disasters and terrorist attacks. So, well, what's your comment? Is it okay to look to them for that?
Of course. I mean, we have look, you hear all the thing about sequestration, right? Now, you know who voted for and helped create sequestration was the President of the United States. And now he's out telling everybody else they created it. Do you know how much spending of our total spending that a long-term application of sequestration would take? It would consume about 2.2% of our annual spending. 2.4 maybe. It's 2 point something. And all of these issues that all the police force are going to be laid off and all the hospitals are going to close and all, that's just a crock. There will be some spending cuts. There may well be too many or the wrong kind of spending cuts in some places. And there may well be too much spending cuts in the Defense Department, but let's get something straight. We're not talking about robbing the bank. We're talking about a 10-year, so much a year kind of deal. Now, sequestration won't last but a month, because the next thing that comes up at the end of the month is the issue of finally getting a federal budget. Now, you know, what the administration wants to do is force the Republicans to close the government, because they believe that that'll help them win the House in 2014. And the Republicans better get their story worked out. But there are a lot of Democrats that wouldn't vote for that stuff either, because they've got to run for office. So I think it's time that everybody sort of got together and get over this Mickey Mouse beating up on each other and realize the facts. How much money are we talking about? How are we going to go about it? How do we do it over a long period of time? And then we can do that, and then we'll go fight about everything else. Will we get it all done? Probably not as clean and as nice as we like, but we'll get there, because there is a system of checks and balances. Whose benefit it's going to accrue to, I'm not sure. But there's a long time between now and 2014. Not as long as you might like, but it's a long time. You asked a good question. This is an issue that if I've decided, I think, after I've done this speech, I think I'm going to get cards that just say, "Just the facts, ma'am." Most of you are too young to remember that. So, and I think we're going to hand them out all over the place during this going on. I can do one quick question. You can I?
One quick one.
You pick it.
Who's left? How about over here?
Good.
No, I'm sorry. Right there, right by the mic.
Thank you very much. DeRoy Murdoch with the Atlas Economic Research Foundation. Thank you for your comments. You've pointed to high taxes, litigation, regulation as concrete reasons why the economy is suffering. I'm wondering if you might comment on something more ethereal, which is the tone we hear from the President of the United States and a lot of his allies, which is the top 1% don't pay their fair share in taxes. They aren't living by the same rules as we are. If you build a business, you didn't build that, someone else did. Does that rhetoric, you think, actually hurt the economy, or do businessmen and businesswomen hear that and just shrug their shoulders and go on with what their plans would be otherwise?
Well, it's certainly disappointing. They sure pay a lot of taxes. Who's arguing whether you should pay another 2 or 3% or something? I don't think anybody really argued about that. If it were looked at in a situation that everybody said, well, we're going to do a balanced thing. We're going to cut these costs. We haven't touched entitlements yet. Everybody that makes that kind of money knows how to count, and we need to go and do that. I think the idea of demeaning success is a real mistake. In fact, we're starting a new deal at the Chamber. In our foundation, we're going to get, I don't know how we're going to do it, but we're doing it to encourage and support success, and encourage and support risk-taking, and encourage and support without demeaning the people that do it, whether it's in universities or in companies or in the public life. Argue the fundamental issues and debate the facts. It is a problem when 52% of the people that work in America don't pay any federal income tax. It is a problem. I understand the sensitivity, but it is a problem when, having cut the payments to Social Security and after stability is back, we put them back, that everybody's talking about a tax increase being led by others. And I just think, just the facts, ma'am. It'll help. We don't do presidential politics. We do all the rest of it. I'm all over the world. I can't meet with heads of state all over the place and be discussing whether we're trying to get rid of the president. And besides that, there's another reason I don't want to do presidential politics. There'll be 40 people that think they want to run sitting in my lobby. So the bottom line is, I'm going to end here. You guys, well, let's make an unholy alliance. You guys get the facts and we'll disseminate them.
Thank you, Tom. I think it is clear how fortunate we are to believe in the power of ideas.
Supply the common sense and the fresh thinking of the Manhattan Institute.